In the modern world, we are increasingly confronted with a rising tide of anti-intellectualism, a pervasive tendency to dismiss reason, evidence, and the pursuit of truth in favour for easily digestible opinions and sensational narratives. This is not merely a passing trend, it is a profound distortion of how we approach knowledge itself. Illusions are presented as facts, and facts are dismissed as illusions. The disjunction between reality and perception has far-reaching consequences, which touch on political, historical, psychological beliefs and knowledge bases. Take, for example, the flat earth theory, a belief that directly contradicts centuries of scientific observation and empirical evidence. Yet this theory persists and even gains followers, suggesting a dangerous trend, an erosion of trust in objective knowledge. Similarly, the debate over gender dysphoria often seems clouded by competing opinions on the very existence of biological sex, despite clear biological realities. These are not merely philosophical differences, they are fundamental misunderstandings, illusions, that when left unchecked have real-world consequences on individuals and society. We see these illusions also within the political sphere. The misunderstanding of socialism's, communism's historical consequences. Let us pause and remind ourselves, socialism or Marxism can be found within the book written by Marx, titled The Communist Manifesto. Therefore, the notion that socialism is different to communism is psychological subversion, nothing more, nothing less. And these misunderstandings have led to the romanticization of communist or socialist ideologies that in practice have resulted in widespread suffering, from Maoist China to the Soviet Union. Yet these distortions are often presented as solutions to modern societal problems, with proponents urging us to embrace systems that ignore the painful lessons of history, as if those lessons had never been written in the first place. We can think about the psychological and perhaps politically motivated theoretical frameworks of critical race theory and intersectionality. These have sparked intense debates about race, identity and power, and leading to policies in practice of diversity, equity and inclusion. Gender dysphoria and gender fluidity, the denial of biological reality and the illusion of fluid gender, is also interlinked with these notions. And while these notions in themselves could be put under a wider bracket of perhaps Marxist wokeism, which not only aims for a redistribution of wealth, but also a racial and genetic redistribution, which is unpalatable and dangerous. We need not look into the past histories of Europe to see where such positions ended in atrocities remembered globally. In all of these cases, such as biological, related to gender dysphoria, scientific, such as flat earth theory, ignoring historical consequences of socialism, or a denial of biological gender, are illusions, and yet they are perpetrated, propagated, and accepted by the masses as truth. The line between knowledge and opinion becomes increasingly blurred, and with it our ability to navigate the complexities of the world with a grounded sense of reality. This confusion is no small matter, and can lead to mental distress as individuals struggle to make sense of contradictory and incoherent narratives. It can also lead to physical harm in the form of misguided policies and the personal toll of living according to distorted views of reality. Most concerning, it leads to civil unrest as communities fracture over fundamental disagreements about what consists truth. This phenomenon is not without historical precedent. During the Cultural Revolution in China, the masses were forced to publicly denounce those perceived to deviate from the prevailing ideological norms. These were labelled struggle sessions, in which coerced individuals were forced to conform to illusions, rather than upholding a priori knowledge, i.e. truth, branding those who sought truth or questioned the narratives of the state as enemies. The pressure to adhere to false ideologies led to intellectual and emotional repression, brain drain, stifling free thought and creating a toxic environment in which reality was subordinated to the will of the collective. This practice is not just unethical, but undermines the very fabric of society by replacing truth with conformity. The imposition of falsehoods, especially when supported by coercion, leads to personal suffering and decay of collective moral and intellectual integrity. Truth is inherently natural, and nature itself is the foundation of health. As Seneca wisely observed, all vices are at odds with nature, for they abandon the proper order of things. In this instance, the proper order of things we are discussing is a priori knowledge, truth, and a movement away from truth and a replacement of truth with illusion is at the very odds of nature and is therefore a vice, leading to mental distress, physical distress, and civil unrest. If illusion is unnatural, it must then lead to vice, a disordered, unhealthy existence. This misalignment with truth and nature disrupts both mental and physical well-being, causing harm for individuals and the greater social fabric itself. As Marcus Aurelius aptly stated, what is not good for the hive is not good for the bee. Just as the health of the individual is tied to the health of the collective, so too is the health of society dependent on the alignment of its members with the truth and natural order. To better understand the consequences of this dangerous confusion we face in this modern epoch, we must first look back to the teachings of ancient philosophers such as Plato. In his Republic, Plato offers us the allegory of the cave, a metaphor that illuminates how deeply human beings are susceptible to living in a state of ignorance, even when the truth is right in front of them. This allegory is not just an ancient parable, it is an enduring warning through the ages, one that speaks directly to the struggles we face today: anti-intellectualism and psychological subversion. The allegory of the cave, as found in the book we will be looking at, Penguin's classic edition of Plato's Republic, an easily digestible form, provides a framework for understanding how illusions, what's defined in Plato's forms framework as opinions, are often mistaken for facts, what is known as knowledge, and why this can be so dangerous to the well-being of both individuals and society at large. What is not good for the hive is not good for the bee. Let us look at the allegory in itself to provide an outline and an understanding. In his work, Republic, Plato presents an enduring metaphor for human understanding, the allegory of the cave. Picture this: a group of prisoners who have been chained in a cave for their entire lives. They are forced to face a wall in front of them, and all that they can see are shadows cast by objects behind them, illuminated by a fire. These shadows are the only reality the prisoners know, so they believe that these fleeting images are the entirety of existence. To summarize, there is a group of civilians in a cave, shackled, with their hands and feet only able to move their head in one direction, facing a wall. On this wall, there is shadows projected by perhaps others. This could be a ruling class or perhaps enemy subversion. As the civilians cannot explore their environment as they are shackled and their heads can only look one way, they perceive these shadows as reality. This scenario mirrors how human beings often accept what they see and hear without ever questioning or understanding the source. For if those prisoners, those citizens, understood they're in a cave and looking at shadows cast from flames, from a ruling elite or an enemy subversion, they would have understanding that this is a mere illusion and not reality or factual knowledge-based information. In this modern era, there may also be mistaken appearances for reality, and what we're told by others can form the basis of what we believe to be true. This is ever prominent within the digital sphere, in which a modern example of this cave would be, in fact, a screen being the shadows and the prisoners being civilians, merely watching the digital world, mistakenly understanding that as reality. We know when we look around there are biological fundamental differences to sex and gender. However, watching the online world, I.E. the shadows, we can see that this biological fact is mismatched to biological reality. Let's say one prisoner managed to break free from his chains. At first, he struggles to adjust the brightness of the world outside the cave. But as his eyes gradually adjust, he begins to see things as they truly are. He realizes that the shadows he once believed to be real were simply distorted images of the outside world. The light from the sun allows him to perceive the world clearly, and he finally grasps the truth of reality. When this enlightened prisoner returns to the cave to share his newfound knowledge with the others, a knowledge that, in fact, they were previously in a cave watching shadows, and reality, truth, not illusion, lies outside of this cave. The other prisoners or civilians resist. They are so accustomed to the shadows that they prefer them, even when faced with the absolute truth of facts and knowledge and the outside world. The harsh light of reality changes their entire worldview, and they cling to the comfort of ignorance. This resistance to knowledge is a common response when people are confronted with truths that challenge long-held beliefs. The allegory of the cave serves as a metaphor for Plato's understanding of knowledge. Plato divides knowledge into different categories, each representing a different level of understanding. These categories show us how we move from ignorance and illusion to true knowledge. Let us first look at the different categories of knowledge in Plato's framework. First of all, imagination, eikasia. This is the lowest level of understanding in the allegory. It represents the prisoner's perception of the shadows of the wall. They do not understand the shadows are mere reflections of objects. They believe the shadows are the truth, the fact, the knowledge, the real world. This level of knowledge is based purely on imagination and is distorted because it relies on what they see without understanding the true source behind it. Following imagination is belief, pistis. The next level of understanding is belief. This corresponds to the prisoners who, after seeing physical objects behind them, if they could turn their head or listen to the escaped prisoner that came back, begin to realize that shadows are not the whole picture. They believe in the existence of physical objects, but they still lack a deeper understanding of how the world works. While this belief is closer to reality, closer to knowledge than mere imagination, it is still not true knowledge. The prisoner or citizen does not genuinely understand what that physical object is. only that the shadow is a shadow and it's being cast from something else. Both imagination and belief are opinions. 3. Thinking. Dhyana. At this stage, individuals begin to use reason and intellectual thought. They engage in abstract thinking and can understand concepts that are not immediately tangible, such as mathematics. This level of knowledge moves closer to the truth, but is still not the highest form of understanding. It's a step up from belief, but still not perfect or complete. This is no longer an opinion, but knowledge. Finally, 4. Understanding. Gnosis. The highest level of knowledge in Plato's framework is true understanding. This is the ability to see things as they truly are, without distortion. It's the full grasp of reality, free from illusion, and represents the highest form of insight. At this level, one understands the world and their place in it, the natural order, not just through perception, but through clarity and deep comprehension. If I make a brief comparison to support your understanding. 1. Imagination is the individual fully believing the truth in the shadows. Belief, number 2, is the individual, the prisoner's belief that they are shadows, but without a full understanding of the physical objects that are creating them or the world around them. They are still prisoners to illusion. Number 3, thinking is an abstract form of knowledge and refers to an understanding of a priori information, such as 2 plus 2 equals 4. And 4, understanding, would be the prisoner fully leaving the cave and reaching a state of factual knowledge, moving away from illusions, having found out that, in fact, the prisoner, the civilian, was in a cave watching shadows. Again, we can reframe this to the modern epoch, in which a citizen simply on their phones, taking part in digital consumption, believing the algorithms and the curated information that is presented to them as full knowledge, when in fact it is mere shadows, an illusion. A stepping out of vast, unmoderated, and by unmoderated, I don't mean in terms of regulation from a third party, I mean in terms of moderation of the consumption. When the individual puts down the technological devices, or at least for entertainment purposes, can step out of the cave and reach a level of understanding based in facts, not fiction. Knowledge versus opinion. Opinion being 1 and 2, imagination and belief, and knowledge being 3 and 4, thinking and understanding. The central distinction in Plato's framework for knowledge is between knowledge and opinion. Knowledge is rooted in truth and reality. It is stable, unchanging, and not subject to personal biases. It is understanding things as they truly are, free from distortion. Knowledge is reliable because it's grounded in something real. Opinion, on the other hand, is rooted in perception and belief. Opinions are often influenced by external factors, such as societal pressures, emotional responses, or misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, psychological subversion. Each of those words can be used interchangeably. Opinions are not grounded in truth, and they can be mistaken for knowledge. In the allegory of the cave, the prisoner's belief in the shadows is a perfect example of opinion. They are trapped by their own perceptions, which are not aligned with reality. We see this in the modern epoch, in individuals who have experienced being trapped by their perceptions and literally trapped inside, isolated throughout the pandemic, leaving their senses to be fully engulfed through the digital and virtual world, creating illusions, shadows, which appear as facts that have not yet been unchecked. perhaps why there is such a strife in mental unrest and civil unrest in 2024 and 2025, in which a stepping out of the cave back into reality has led some of those who have taken on illusionary beliefs as facts to be confused, distressed, and resist, just as those prisoners in the cave resisted the freedman's information regarding what it was like outside of the cave. Let us really fully examine the comparison between the allegory of the cave and digital consumption. And to clarify and summarize, the allegory of the cave involves an individual, a civilian, watching shadows on a cave wall projected by a ruling class or enemy subversion with the belief that these shadows are in fact facts. If an individual leaves the cave and finds out the true knowledge, upon his return there may be significant resistance due to psychological distress of the other prisoners, in which they are being informed their versions of reality are in fact shadows or illusions. They would much prefer the comfort of keeping it that way. Digital media and the allegory of the cave in the modern epoch. In Plato's allegory of the cave, prisoners are chained in a dark cavern, forced to stare at a wall in front of them, watching shadows cast by objects behind them. These shadows are distorted reflections of the real world, but to the prisoners, they are all they know. They mistake these fleeting images for truth itself, in much the same way the digital world of today presents us with shadows, distorted, curated projections of reality, often masquerading as fact. Illusion, imagination, ikasia, the shadows on the wall. In this modern epoch, the realm of digital media, the virtual world, the digital world, illusion is presented as fact on mass scale, and is even propagated by governmental systems enforcing regulation on these digital establishments. We saw that through perhaps the pandemic and other areas of illusionary beliefs, such as gender dysphoria and biological reality. Social media algorithms create a never-ending stream of content designed to reinforce these beliefs, these illusions, rather than challenge them. TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram are filled with highly selective, algorithm-driven narratives that promote an anti-intellectual worldview, such as the idea socialism is inherently virtuous, or gender is fluid and non-binary, or that borders are arbitrary constructs. All of these illusionary beliefs are pushed forward by platforms that thrive on emotional reactions they elicit, or perhaps pushed forward by a ruling class, or perhaps pushed forward by enemy subversion, without aiming to have thoughtful discussion or reasoned evidence. These digital projections, like the shadows in the cave, are simplistic and fragmented interpretations of reality, but they are presented as the only truth, leaving little room for critical examination. The shadows on the wall are comforting to the prisoners because they are familiar. Similarly, many are drawn to these digital illusions because they align with existing illusionary beliefs that have been imprinted upon them during this period of the pandemic, when people primarily were isolated and spent the majority of their time within the digital and virtual world. When truth is suppressed in favor of a ruling class, enemy subversion, or merely emotional satisfaction but factually questionable ideas, we are no different from the prisoners who mistake shadows for reality. The information we consume from these platforms, though it may appear as fact, is an illusion, a construction that distorts the factual, knowledge-based, fundamental world into sensational, illusionary narratives. Just as the prisoners in the cave mistake the shadows for facts. The youth of today, and perhaps people of all ages, mistake the digital virtual realm as fact also, when perhaps they are illusionary beliefs. Belief, the validation of illusion. Let us look towards belief, pistis, the phrase where an illusion is treated as something more than just a shadow. It is not only accepted as a truth, but built upon by further reinforcement. This is where frameworks like critical race theory, intersectionality, or gender critical theory come into play. These ideologies may contain or be presented as truths. They are misapplied, leading to further societal divisions. Critical race theory and the intersectionality framework are racial diagnostic matrices, highlighting certain groups have power and certain groups do not. This is an illusion. Do not think for one moment the leader of the People's Republic of China or the leader of Russia or perhaps Middle Eastern countries feel in any way that Europeans are in a privileged position over them. Quite the opposite. Nor, on a global level, is there a belief in gender fluidity. In fact, in some cases, these theoretical models out themselves as what they are, Marxist, revolutionary, illusionary beliefs. At this stage, people often buy into the ideas without questioning their foundations, just as the prisoners in the cave accept the shadows in reality, as reality. When theories like these are presented as fact, they encourage a belief that supports a view that ignores the underlying complexities of human experience, much like the prisoner's refusal to accept the entire understanding of the world is based on illusion. The stage of belief can also manifest in aggressive social resistance or cancel culture. This has previously been seen as heresy, excommunication, shunning, or exile. Cancel culture is not a new phenomenon, but a new language. And just as history is being eroded in order to support these illusionary beliefs, the lack of wording and having to create a new modern word of cancel culture just demonstrates this point further. Just as the prisoners in Plato's allegory resist the truth because it challenges their disillusionary beliefs, we see resistance in today's world, civil unrest, and also a mental health crisis, and perhaps a physical health crisis too. What is not good for the bee is not good for the hive. Science, such as the well-established biological distinctions between male and female, or factual historical truths like the suffering caused by Maoist regimes, is rejected or undermined. This is the resistance. Resistance of accepting these beliefs are illusionary and not genuine fundamental knowledge. People who question prevailing narratives, such as the existence of biological sex or the implications of historical ideologies, are vilified and silenced, branded as enemies of the collective understanding. Those who stand up to these illusionary beliefs, much like a freed prisoner in the cave, are met with hostility, resistance, and even social exclusion. As we are looking at Plato, it's also fitting to remember his teacher Socrates was killed as a heretic due to similar processes, perhaps leading to the creation of this document itself that we can look to in today's modern epoch. Thinking, Dionara, the resistance to true knowledge. As we ascend the ladder from opinion, illusion, to knowledge, we reach thinking, the stage of abstract reasoning. Here we engage with ideas that challenge the prevailing illusions, and we begin to grasp a more complex understanding of the world. However, this higher level of thinking is often resisted in our modern digital world. Intellectuals who seek to uphold scientific and historical truths find themselves attacked by the forces of popular opinion and mob mentality within the disillusioned, within the digital realm. We see this today quite dramatically, and it's a notion that really reinforces the ideology of anti-intellectualism within this modern epoch. We have seen Charles Darwin's grave being desecrated. Similarly, we've seen Winston Churchill, a pivotal figure in defending democracy during the Second World War, facing erasure from public memory in some places due to his portrait being removed from political offices in London, symbolising a rejection of historical figures who are seen as problematic in relation to factual history in today's ideological climate. And by ideological, I suppose I should mean holding illusionary beliefs. For knowledge is not ideological, it is a priori, fundamental facts. These efforts to erase inconvenient truths are a form of intellectual repression, not unlike the resistance the prisoners in Plato's cave have had to endure not unlike the resistance the prisoners in Plato's cave have to the freed prisoner who attempts to show them the truth. In the final stage, gnosis, or true understanding, knowledge becomes clear and unshakable. The freed prisoner who has seen the light of the outside world, not just heard about it or felt it, understands the shadows were never really the full truth. Likewise, when we begin to understand the complexities of the human experience and real-world consequences of illusionary ideologies, we move closer to true knowledge. However, in a world increasingly dominated by digital shadows, digital projections, the digital realm, the digital world, social media, short-form content, news, entertainment, television, advertising. Each of these are social engineering, and the fact we see them in unison highlights the likelihood they are stemming from a ruling class or perhaps enemy subversion, just as the shadows worked in unison within the cave. As we move closer to true knowledge, however, in a world increasingly dominated by these digital projections, this level of understanding is harder to achieve. The pursuit of truth is complicated by the overwhelming noise of modern media and the interconnectedness of this illusionary media, which distorts and simplifies the world to fit into easily digestible digital consumption. True knowledge requires a willingness to confront uncomfortable realities and challenge prevailing illusions. It requires the courage to reject the simplifications offered by digital consumption, news outlets, entertainment platforms, and instead engage in deep reflection and intellectual thought. Just as the freed prisoner must adjust to the blinding light of the outside world, so too must we learn to tolerate the discomfort of intellectual rigour and critical thinking. I must add there is nothing intolerable or uncomfortable about knowledge or truth. However, for those who may be listening who were subjected to such psychological subversion, spending more time in the digital realm, specifically through those periods of isolation, it may be distressing and uncomfortable, as what has been presented for so long, 2019 to 2025, 5 years, half of a decade, is illusionary. And taking a step into embracing true knowledge may be as blinding for the man's eyes as the freed prisoner leaving the cave. The consequence of living in this digital cave is profound. As Plato's allegory teaches us, those who remain in the cave are not only trapped in their own ignorance, but their lack of understanding impacts their mental and physical well-being, which, when living in a civilization, leads to civil unrest. When we accept illusions as truth, in this case, illusionary beliefs, there's a loss of touch with deeper realities, fundamental truths of the universe, a priori knowledge. A detachment from the world as it truly is emerges, in which is replaced with fragmented, illusionary versions of truth that aim to confuse and alienate, leading to conformity, just as we saw in the Soviet Union or perhaps the People's Republic of China. It is important to provide illusionary beliefs in order for revolutions to occur, but perhaps this is a side note. The more individuals, prisoners, civilians cling to the digital shadows projected on the digital wall, the virtual and digital realm, the more divided a society becomes. Echo chambers form, or perhaps are formed for us through a ruling class or enemy subversion, in which individuals, prisoners, only hear voices that reinforce those illusionary beliefs and reject those fundamental knowledge, those fundamental factual pieces of knowledge. Just as the prisoners in the cave resist the truth because it challenges their deeply held beliefs, individuals also resist the truth when it comes from outside of their digital realms. This has led to a fragmented society where unity and common understanding has become increasingly difficult to achieve. Or perhaps unity and common understanding is only difficult to achieve in relation to those who understand knowledge and those who understand illusions. But there is a way out. Just as one prisoner escapes the cave and comes to see the world as it truly is, we too can break free from the illusions of digital media and social ideologies, which in this case are shadows on a digital wall projected by a ruling class or perhaps enemy subversion. This process begins with critical thinking, philosophical thought, and introspection. Questioning of narratives that are projected onto the digital screens which do not align with historical, fundamental scientific truths is the best way forward. It is not about rejecting digital media consumption entirely, as education and occupation in this modern epoch relies to some degree on digital realms or digital worlds, such as emails, or perhaps even listening to this discussion here today. When it slips into the realm of entertainment, specifically when entertainment is presented as factual, it can limit the understanding of an individual to recognize knowledge, fact, or to recognize fiction, illusion. Philosophy plays a crucial role in this process. Just as the freed prisoner in Plato's allegory finds clarity in the light of truth, philosophy helps us navigate the complexities of the modern epoch. It teaches us to reflect, to question, and seek deeper understanding by aligning ourselves with knowledge, i.e. truth, This can only be done by breaking free from the digital realm, the distractions and distortions within it, and a reconnection to what is real and meaningful. What is real and meaningful is the natural order, the natural world, and within that is truth, knowledge. In a world dominated by digital illusions and digital shadows projected by a ruling class or perhaps an enemy subversion, philosophy provides us with a path to clarity, a way out of the cave and into the light of truth. Health, intellectual well-being, a healthy mind, body, and soul. Our souls are dyed with the experiences we meet. I wonder how it would be dyed if we constantly were projected illusions as opposed to an understanding of truth. Perhaps the wool, the soul, would become corrupted in some ways. Moderation and balance in the digital epoch. As mentioned before, we cannot avoid this digital realm, and there are definitely uses for it. The aim is to use it effectively, and I think a 3-part model or framework is of utmost importance in regards to this. Education, occupation, entertainment. Education and occupation is used for productive members of civilization. Entertainment is used for those who consume within civilization. The allegory of the cave, as Plato masterfully demonstrates, serves not merely as a cautionary tale about the dangers of ignorance, but also an invitation to engage with the world critically, to question the very nature of reality as presented to us in this digital age. We find ourselves surrounded by an abundance of digital media, that is, the digital and virtual realm. Apps, television, advertising, all social engineering, influenced through either a ruling class or enemy subversion, just as each of the shadows were presented through a ruling class or enemy subversion within Plato's allegory of the cave. These shadows on the wall is consumed daily, often presenting distorted, illusionary reflections of the world that do not align with fundamental knowledge, fundamental truths. Yet to deny the existence of these shadows would be to ignore an essential aspect of this modern epoch. We do encounter the media, and we are exposed to new ideas through this media consumption. Therefore, I would like to announce that I don't feel it is wholly dangerous or inherently wrong to engage with digital media or the digital realm. I feel perhaps it is a tool that one could wield for wisdom, or perhaps wield with carelessness, leading to danger on a personal level, emotional, mental, social, health and well-being, but which would lead to a distress or unrest within society, civil unrest. And I think that has been seen to play out within the 2024 and also perhaps 2025. We must be clear. The consumption of these shadows are dangerous. We must understand the illusions, the shadows, are not the full picture. They are fragmented pieces of reality which are presented through a ruling class or enemy subversion, just like the prisoners in the cave who are presented with shadows from a ruling class or enemy subversion. Let us not fall into the same trap of believing that these projections are the sum of reality itself, even though these projections appear on a digital screen as opposed to a cave wall. Grounded in knowledge. Engagement with digital media is a part of modern life. We must not lose sight of the importance of grounding ourselves in true knowledge. As Plato's allegory so poignantly illustrates, the journey out of the cave is not one of mere observation, but one of transformation, a shift from illusion to truth, from fiction to fact. This transformation is not an easy one if individuals have been in the cave for some time, and it will require effort and discipline, and above all the capacity for discernment. This is why I believe an understanding of Plato's framework for knowledge classification is going to be of utmost support for yourself. To remain grounded in true knowledge is to constantly question the reality presented to us, to seek beyond the shadows, to strive for deeper understanding of the world. It is to pursue knowledge that is tested and verifiable, knowledge that stands the test of time and scrutiny. This is not to say that all knowledge must be scientific or academic in nature. After all, true wisdom encompasses facts, but also moral and ethical clarity, an understanding of human nature, and an appreciation for the natural order, deeper truths of existence. In the context of the digital world, the virtual realm, we must engage critically with the content we consume. Just as a philosopher approaches the world with a sense of skepticism and inquiry, so too should we approach the digital and virtual world. Is the information we are consuming well supported by factual evidence, or is it coming from a source with a record of disintegrity or unethical positioning? Does the information we consume present in a way that encourages thoughtful reflection, or does it provoke an emotional response, or aiming to quiet or oppose dissenting views? Does the digital media we consume aim to have diversity of thought or one-track mind? Please bear in mind a short example of a line of people in a grocery store or petrol station. Each person looking very different, perhaps racially, perhaps stylistically, perhaps in gender, perhaps in hairstyle. Yet everyone in the line thinking the same thought. How diverse would that line really be? Diversity of thought is paramount. Diversity of aesthetics is superficial. This process of critical engagement is vital to maintaining our mental, physical and spiritual health, which results in health of the whole civilization. What is good for the hive is good for the bee. What is good for the bee is good for the hive. Without it, we risk being swayed by the currents of misinformation, disinformation, subversion, propaganda, fake news, whichever word you wish to use there, manipulated by forces that seek to distract us from the pursuit of truth, a ruling class or enemy subversion. When we ground ourselves in knowledge that is well researched, reasoned, rooted in moral understanding, and also with an ability to challenge, to explore, to discern, we begin to live with greater clarity and peace. We fortify our minds and bodies and souls, allowing us to face the world not just as passive recipients of illusions, but as active seekers of truth. Picture this. If the shadow on the cave wall told you to turn around, or presented an option for you to turn around, then perhaps that shadow would not be wholeheartedly illusionary. It would still be an illusion, a shadow projected, but it would not be enforcing one methodology of viewing the world or having one worldview. In the end, the goal is to escape the shadows of the cave, not to remain in them. In the end, the goal is to escape the illusionary beliefs within the digital and virtual realm and not to remain in them. While the digital landscape can be a tool for education and occupation, it is not a realm in which we should surrender our attention or sense of purpose. We must live according to the natural order. We are human, and humans live within physical reality, not a virtual world. We must approach the digital world with clarity and discernment, recognizing it's a fragmented reflection of reality, just as the shadows on the cave wall. It is not the full truth, although perhaps it could contain the full truth. It is essential that we use digital media not for entertainment or mindless consumption, but as a means to further our understanding and engage in meaningful work. By doing so, we can avoid becoming lost in the illusion and instead preserve our connection to true knowledge, our history, our science, empirical understanding, knowledge that is grounded in reason, ethics, and the pursuit of wisdom. Breaking free and embracing this true knowledge, turning away from the shadows and supporting well-being. In this modern age where shadows in the form of digital media compete for our attention through digital consumption and a willingness to engage in the virtual world, there is a crossroads, a juncture where the allure of shadows and the comfort of these shadows threaten to cloud the understanding of the genuine, factual, knowledge-based world. Plato's allegory of the cave stands a timeless guide, urging us to look beyond the illusions that have ensnared us, to question what we see, and to strive for knowledge that is rooted in truth, reason, and ethics. We are each of us faced with the shadows of a modern era, a modern epoch. Distorted projections presented through the ruling class or enemy subversions saturate the digital and virtual realm. These shadows endanger not only the individual, but also the society the individual resides in. We must not fail to recognize these shadows for what they are, illusionary projections. To remain trapped in the cave, consumed by what is presented to us without questioning, is to forfeit our capacity for genuine understanding, and perhaps to forfeit our soul. We must ask ourselves, what is the natural order of the world? And how does digital consumption fit into that natural order? Can it be used for learning, for work? Or is it an addiction to the shadows, projected through the ruling class or enemy subversion? In Plato's vision, the journey out of the cave, the journey towards enlightenment, is arduous for those that have been in the cave for prolonged periods of time, not to mention if they were in there for 5 years. For it requires not just intellectual effort, but the courage to confront truths that may have been hidden in the shadows whilst they spent their time within the cave. As we seek to engage with the world critically, we must remember true knowledge is the accumulation of facts, but also the development of wisdom. Wisdom grounded in the pursuit of goodness, virtue, and moral clarity. Just as the freed prisoner in Plato's allegory must adapt to the brightness of the sun, so too must we often adjust to the fundamental truths of the world if those have been hidden for some time. And if those illusionary beliefs have led to moral standpoints and behaviors, thoughts, or feelings, it may be a conflict for those individuals to face up to those factual truths and the moral implications of them. This journey, however, is not one of total withdrawal or rejection from the world around us. Engaging with the digital virtual realm with all things requires moderation. It is not wrong to observe the shadows with an understanding that they are shadows and projections. To engage with the digital world and information that comes from it, it's imperative we do so with discernment, understanding the limitations and distortions of digital projections. We can use this technology not as a replacement for genuine knowledge, but as a tool for further understanding, further development of ideas. In this sense, the digital realm can serve as a mirror, perhaps, to the world beyond the cave. Although I feel, even if this is the case, careful consideration and discernment must take place. We must learn to navigate these projections and shadows not just as passive consumers of convenient narratives projected by a ruling class or enemy subversion, but we must each use our agency, free will, Holy Spirit, vril, as active seekers of wisdom. True knowledge is not found in simple shadows or in illusionary beliefs that cause division, but a commitment to truth, intellectual integrity, and ethical living, discernment. We can use Plato's framework of knowledge to support our discernment. It is through the pursuit of knowledge we can restore balance to our minds, reclaim agency, and contribute to not just a healthier individual, but a healthier society. In this process, philosophy becomes our greatest ally, a guide to help us distinguish between opinion and knowledge, illusion and reality, fact and fiction. Just as the freed prisoner, having seen the light of the outside world, can never return to the cave with the same eyes, we too, once we have tasted the light of truth, strive never to return to the shadows. By embracing this journey of self-discovery, intellectual clarity and transformation, we can begin to free ourselves from the constraints of illusions, unshackle our feet, and step into the light of genuine understanding, knowledge, peace and wisdom, which awaits for us outside of the cave. Let us not remain prisoners in a cave of propaganda and shadowy illusions projected on a cave wall in the modern epoch presented through the digital virtual realm, but instead step boldly into the sunlight of reason, truth, and ethical practice. This is the path to not only intellectual freedom, but the restoration of our mental health, physical health, and social well-being. This is through the pursuit of knowledge, grounded in virtue, guided by reason and illuminated by wisdom. We can escape the shadows and find our way to the light of true understanding. To bring a brief summary, the digital world, the digital realm, in which individuals were subjected to through a long period of isolation, specifically young individuals without a without a fully formed understanding of a worldview, historically, scientifically, psychologically. This digital realm can be akin to Plato's allegory of the cave, in which the digital media consumed is parallel to the shadows portrayed on the wall of the cave. These shadows are not true knowledge, but instead illusionary beliefs, fiction. And therefore, within the digital virtual realm, there is a potential that, a highly likely potential, that these projections are illusionary beliefs, fiction, and that the factual beliefs are seen as uncomfortable due to the prolonged amount of time in the cave being the digital virtual world. To support individuals, they must step out of the cave and adjust their eyes to the brightness of the light. In this modern epoch, depending on the amount of time spent within this digital virtual world, it may have moral implications related to thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that were taken on during the time of the illusionary beliefs being held by the individual. To clarify, fact or fiction navigating digital consumption for well-being highlights knowledge, supports mental health, physical health, and social well-being, supporting the fabric of civilization and society. Fiction, illusionary beliefs, distorting fundamental truths, leading to mental distress, physical distress, divisions in society, and ultimately civil unrest or distress. Fundamental truth is goodness. Fundamental truth is the natural order. Everything unnatural is a vice. And that is true also of the shadows, whether they are known or unknown to the individuals within the cave. And in this modern epoch, that cave is the digital and virtual world. Fact or fiction, navigating digital consumption for well-being. Philosophy as therapy. 20/01/2025 02